I believe that visual art allows us humans to express ideas and emotions in a way that words just can't. And I think the world really needs art. It needs your art. It needs my art. In this video, I will dive deep into the strategies and principles that will shape my personal brand going forward. And by sharing my journey, well, it can shape your brand too. This is probably, or I'm pretty sure it is, the most powerful video I've ever made. Hello everyone, I'm Jonas Paurell. I'm a full-time artist and educator. I specialize in nature and conservation photography, and I'm also the founder of Terra Photography Expeditions, a company where I take people into the wild so that I can combine my passion for the natural world with guiding others to experience it and to capture its beauty through photography. The power of branding is essential for any photographer who wants to be truly seen and appreciated. In a saturated market like today, where everyone is a photographer, a unique and authentic brand is what will make you stand out. When you think about wildlife photography, you wouldn't expect to find it at a Michael Kenna exhibition, but it is exactly what makes his brand so powerful. Michael Kenna's brand has a lot of clarity and consistency. And that's exactly what makes his brand so powerful. It's a bit like ordering a Whopper. You know exactly what you're going to get every time. And that's actually a really good thing. If I'm in the mood for some minimalist black and white landscapes, I know exactly where to look. Perhaps at the work of Michael Kenna. When people know your brand, they know what to expect, and that generates a lot of trust. For the past 2 months, I've been on an intense journey. I've been relentlessly researching how do you brand your photography business to get the world's attention. You have to have a strong and consistent brand. I think almost all photographers really enjoy working in different genres for different audiences because diversity is fun. But imagine if a burger shop started selling seafood. It would be really confusing to the audience or to the customers. And the same confusion happens when a photographer tries to be everything for everyone. You wouldn't think of that particular restaurant when you wanted seafood. Similarly, your audience in a photography business needs clarity about your work. I actually review the portfolios of photographers that I admire. I analyzed auction sales of major photographic works of art. I studied how photographers at some of the major art fairs presented their brand. I also dug deep into my own thoughts, trying to just make sense of it all. And finally, well, I think I've emerged now with a lot of clarity. It's been 2 months of obsessive research and analysis, and I've condensed all this into this short video. If you find value in this video, feel free to subscribe and leave some of your thoughts down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. But let's now get into it. So what exactly does branding mean for a photographer? It's your business name, your logo, your values, your mission, even your own personality. And of course, it also includes the photographs that you create. Basically, any photo or information that you share with the world. As photographers, we need to be intentional about building a brand that becomes associated with a specific product for a specific audience. Whether you're making a living from your work or simply want to grow your audience to get some more without a clear brand, you're not making it easy for your audience to love your art. And ultimately, that is what branding is all about. Making it easy for the right people to connect with and appreciate your art. Not everyone is going to love what you do. And that's perfectly okay. Your goal should be to resonate with your intended target audience. The ones who truly appreciate and engage with your art. Screw the rest. I used to work in corporate strategy, and I know all too well the importance of branding. But for the longest time, and against perhaps my better judgment, I told myself that simply having something to say, having a mission, should be enough to get people's attention in the art world. You know, it's just not true. A while back, I even made a video where I passionately argued that mission should always come before having a distinct visual style. And I think that video still holds true today. If you haven't seen that video, I suggest you pause this video now and go watch it. You can find the link right here and also in the description below. But if you prefer to stay, well, here's a very quick recap. In the video, I said that style in photography should always be secondary to having a mission. As artists, we need to understand why we create. We need to know what we want to say. And if we're clear on our mission, our why, then we can create work that stays true to that purpose, and that will lead to cohesive and meaningful art. I still stand firmly by this belief. Mission over style is the right order of things, but I've come to realize that having a mission alone may not always be enough to cut through the noise. We have to work a lot smarter than that. So how do we brand the photography that we choose to share? The first clue to effective branding is this: we need to be incredibly selective about what we choose to put out into the world. You could say that I'm obsessed with photography, and that would be the truth. And as an obsessed photographer, I worked in many different genres. I shared it on my website, I shared it on social media, and even just last week on this YouTube channel, I released a video of street photography for Venice, simply because I felt like it. But I don't even consider myself a street photographer. I was just out having fun, enjoying myself, and deciding to share that. Well, there's an issue with that. That approach isn't going to yield the reach that I aspire to achieve. Before we dive into the tools that we can use to brand ourselves, let's take a little step back and look at the key characteristics of a good portfolio. A good portfolio boils down to like 4 things. It's cohesive. The images should belong together, or if they don't belong together at all, well, that needs to be intentional. Your portfolio and your images needs to be thought-provoking. Your work should really encourage careful considerations of the topics that you want to convey, your mission, your why. Your portfolio has to be evocative. You know, your photos should make the viewer feel something. And I think this ties really well into what Roland Barthes described in his essay Camera Lucida as punctum. You know, the detail of a photograph that unexpectedly pricks or moves the viewer. Your work has to be unique. Your work should speak with your own voice. The less you imitate, the more authentic your art becomes. Because great art doesn't need to be traditionally beautiful. Instead, it should just be cohesive, thought-provoking, evocative, and unique. Now, of course, there's a caveat to this. I think there are many really successful artists whose portfolios are not cohesive. And I think this is often because, one, they had an audience before they started sharing their art, which is very possible in this day and age. 2, their personality or life story ties their work together. It compensates for lack of cohesion. 3, they shifted focus during their career, which naturally led to a less cohesive body of work. To make sure that the photographs you share, whether on YouTube, Instagram, your website, a book, whatever, are cohesive, thought-provoking, evocative, and unique, you need to apply an extremely strict filter in terms of what you share. Am I a wildlife photographer? Am I a landscape photographer? Am I perhaps a more generalist nature photographer? Am I a conservation photographer? Am I specialized in Arctic winter photography? Or do I specialize on animals in the tropical rainforests? And how do I present my images, in color or perhaps in black and white? And of course, I'm even more things. So narrowing down what I choose to share involves making some really hard decisions. I'd say these decisions are even uncomfortable. They are limiting. But I truly believe that if I limit what I share, I will ultimately benefit as a photographer. And perhaps a little bit paradoxically, it will set me free to explore my full potential with the freedom of a strong client base on the long term. So by focusing, I'll create a clearer brand. I'll make it easier for my audience to connect with me and my work. And this will also mean that the audience can grow with me when in the future I decide perhaps to explore other genres outside of my typical niche areas. So, what tools do we photographers have at our disposal to navigate this branding journey? We have the mission. Understand why you photograph and what you want to communicate. Just write it down somewhere. I made the whole previous video about how to do that. Follow that. You need to have a niche. Identify the specific area of photography that resonates with you as an audience, that resonates with you as a photographer and perhaps with your audience, and then stick to that. Third is storytelling. And I mean that in the broadest sense possible. You need to make your art both thought-provoking and evocative. And fourth and finally, visual style. Develop a distinct aesthetic that reflects your voice and vision. These 4 tools are so simple, but I believe they are cumulative. The more tools that you incorporate into your brand and your work, the stronger it will become. It will allow your photos to be experienced as uniquely you. We're going to start with unpacking the tool mission. And we're going to do that with an example of conservation photographer Nick Brandt and his series Inherit the Dust. I'm a huge fan of Nick Brandt, and I think this is one of his best series ever. It's a series where he took portraits of animals, which were then printed life-size and placed in a world where humans have taken the space where the animals used to roam. This series really fulfills Nick Brandt's mission to showcase the destructive impact that we humans is having both on the natural world and on ourselves. To unpack niche, we're going to look at the work of Ernst Haas. A niche that Ernst is really well known for is his color street photography from New York. He kind of made that genre. I think that Ernst Haas spent so much time owning that niche that it might even be hard today to be a street photographer in New York and not be inspired by his work. Naturally, Ernst Haas shot many different genres in his life, and he's also incredibly well known for his portraits and his abstracts. But to me, it really is his color street photography that has him etched in the history of photography. When it comes to storytelling, let us use Gregory Crutzen. The majority of Gregory Crutzen's well-known images are shot on sets where every detail has been meticulously planned and arranged. I feel that his images really evoke emotions and they provoke thought as they depict what I can only really describe as kind of like dreamlike dystopian scenes full of mystery. It's impossible to not look at Crutzen's images without being cerebrally and emotionally impacted. His careful planning and staging of his scenes has been a super clear key in his success. And I think it's also what gives him such a unique brand. I think there are few photographers in the world that tell stories as well and as uniquely as Gregory Crutzen. And to unpack style very quickly, let's look at a contemporary Instagram famous photographer, if you want to put it like that I think has really nailed style. And the reason we're looking at the contemporary is because I think that style has really matured now. But before we start looking at the example, let's quickly unpack the concept of style, because I think that is really important in this context. Having a particular style means that the images that you share have a level of sameness across multiple variables. And I think the variables are, for example, subject matter, your primary subject matter, your whatever elements that you include in the frame, whatever weather you shoot in, the seasons you shoot in, etc. I think it really matters in terms of composition, how you shoot your frames, how you frame them up. And I think it comes together with shooting technique, what perspective you use, shutter speed, depth of field, focal length, etc. And finally, perhaps the most important of all, coherent post-processing, which is something that today is fairly easy. So as an example, Benjamin Hardiman is a contemporary photographer based in Iceland, and to me, he really has developed and stuck to his own unique style. So how would one describe Benjamin Hardiman's art? Well, I think his images depicts Icelandic and Arctic landscapes, wildlife and self-portraits. Often he places the subject matter in the center, which creates really balance and simple compositions. I think his compositions are often minimalist, and with the post-processing that amplifies that minimalism, the whites, the blues and the black colors of the Arctic winter landscapes. This kind of post-processing minimizes distractions, and sometimes he adds in a dash of orange and green for variation and contrast. As far as style goes, I think his portfolio, at least that he shares on Instagram, is incredibly well implemented. These photographers share images, or shared in some of the cases, of a very similar nature. I think they employ the tools of branding, and I think that really strengthens their brand. And of course, naturally here, I should say I'm generalizing and guessing, because I don't personally know these 4 photographers. And if they venture too far out of their established brands, well, they risk confusing their audiences. I really like art, and I can't help to mention another example. Jackson Pollock is a perfect example to look at here. During the very peak of his fame, during his drip period, he had this incredibly specific style. All of a sudden, he decides to change, and he starts sharing work that is much darker in the color scheme, and that became known then as his black pourings. And the thing is, when these new works were initially displayed, they didn't sell. It took him a considerable amount of time to regain his status by doing again the traditional color stuff he used to do before he died at the age of 44. I think that's an extremely perfect example of branding. So armed with these tools, can we cut through the noise? So far in my photography career, I've relied on mostly mission, story and niche. And also I've thrown in a splash of whatever I want to do because I want to do it. I've been mixing different missions. I've been mixing beautiful landscapes and wildlife photography made only for the sake that I just wanted to make it. I just wanted to create it. And I mixed this with incredibly intentional conservation photography. Photography made for an incredibly specific purpose. I often allow my stories through my images to be unintentionally inexplicit, trying to allow the viewer to feel whatever emotions they naturally feel. And when it comes to niche, I have been all over the place, because that's what I shoot. Landscapes today, wildlife tomorrow, street the day after, and human subjects the following day. And in addition to that, I've also been mixing seasons. Arctic wildlife next to Amazonian wildlife and mountain photography. It just doesn't work. My biggest intentional exclusion with this has always been style. I have intentionally not applied a sameness across my images. I've allowed style to be a very fluid concept and to be defined by the project. For my conservation work, the images always needs to look natural. Otherwise, the scientists can't use them. And for non-conservation landscape projects, I focused a little bit more on post-processing, but still keeping it very natural, because that's something that I personally like. I want nature to look natural. And then, of course, I've mixed this in with my extremely heavily edited black and white images, which is something that I absolutely love doing and is perhaps my own preference. But that means that I have photographs that don't match sitting next to each other in my portfolio. My portfolio does not feel cohesive and coherent. For me as an artist to move past this, there's always been just one thing missing: intentionality. To make a bold and severely limiting decision to only share images that has a common story, niche and style strategy and mission. It's taken me 20 years as a photographer, and the last 8 of those as a pro, to accept that I was wrong, and that I have to start making these hard decisions. I have to start branding myself. So, where are we going? Well, I'll just say stay tuned for the transformation to begin. And for your art, I hope you can take the tools that I've shared here and make some hard decisions and elevate what you're doing. There are no shortcuts available. There are no tips and tricks. The choices will be hard. The journey will be long. But I'm so sure it will be worth it. And I just want to throw in a final point here. You don't have to make these kind of limiting decisions about what you share and your art. You can just enjoy your photography and share whatever you want. But if you want to take branding seriously, if you really want to reach the masses, well, I think you should consider branding yourself, and I think that will achieve a faster growth. If you enjoyed this video, if it jived with you, subscribe, leave me some comments below so that we can talk to each other. I'd love to meet you. All right, everyone, that's for me. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. There'll be another video next week. Ciao.